Well, happy International Mud Day, everybody. Cheers. Welcome back, everybody, to me doing the one thing that I swore I would never do. But this is my birthday, and since it's my birthday, this means Saturnalia, the Lord of Misrule. Everything is upside down. The people decide, and just for once, I'm gonna do the will of the people, which is give you what you want. I asked a couple of days ago about what kind of video you want me to do, and yeah, you wanted a list. You really, really, really wanted a list, and it took me a while to think about it, and then I came up with the perfect list. This is the only list I'll ever do. Don't ever ask me about it again, please. Anyway, here's the top 10 list that I want to talk about. The top 10 volumes of the Malazan Book of the Fallen in chronological order. So, at place number 10, we have Gardens of the Moon. Quite a good start, it's a bit older now, but, it's a good book. On place number 9, we do have Deadhouse Gates. We're getting warmed up, and everything is ready to go. So that's place number 9. On place number 8, we have Memories of Ice, which, fully hits his stride. The series is going on. We know how books work now. We have a third book now. Awesome. That's why it's already, number 8. On number 7, we do, in fact, have House of Chains. House of Chains just, takes that stride and moves on at a quicker pace. So yeah, that's why it's, number 7. On number 8, not number 8, on number 6, we do have Midnight Tides. Yes, another really good book. I like it a bit more than, just because it's been, more recent, so that's a good point for it. So that's on number 6. On number 5, we have The Bone Hunters. The Bone Hunters, even more recent, and as you all know, I'm very much into new stuff. So, yeah, and that is The Bone Hunters. On place number 4, we have Reaper's Gale. Now we're getting really, really close to the, top 3, so, yeah. This is already almost a top 3 book in chronological order, so really good. Anyway, really new, almost. Anyway, so, before we go to the, top 3, I'll just have, another quick drink. And, yeah. I don't know if you could guess it, but on number 3, top 3, in chronological order, is, of course, Toll the Hounds. And yes, this is almost the top. We don't get much further when it comes to the Malazan Book of the Fallen, so there it is, on place number 3. On number 2, we do have Dust of Dreams. It's not the most recent book, but it's almost the most recent book in the Malazan Book of the Fallen. So that's why it's number 2. And, obviously, on number 1, the most recent volume of the Malazan Book of the Fallen is, of course, The Crippled God. So, there you have your top 10 list. Please like and subscribe, join the Patreon, give me money, give me comments, all of those good things, and I'll see you in a few seconds about some bonus content. And until then, thanks and cheers. Alright, now for a serious list, because obviously I felt that I owed you that, and since you have asked, yeah, the winning question was of course by Jeroen, who asked for a top 10 list of books I don't hate, and I thought about that, and it's really, really hard to do that, because there are very few books I really hate. There are books that, I don't enjoy as much or don't get as much out of, but there are very few books that I hate, except for, I would call them ideological, political, or whatever reasons. Stuff that I think is actively harmful. Your Dan Simmons novels, your, parts of, say, the Drizzt novels by Salvatore. That kind of stuff. Stuff that drives me livid because I think it's actively causing harm. It's perpetuating, very harmful stereotypes. It's turning people into racists, Nazis, and so forth. So everything else I'm fine with, right? There's obviously stuff I love more, but that, I don't know. I don't want to do that. In fact, even, I thought about what kind of books that would be if I, put on books that you probably thought I'd hate. Or, but then I tried to figure out what that would be, and it's like, oh, well, possibly, I don't know, The Hunger Games, which they're not my favorite books, but I don't hate them. And it's probably more like a stereotype that people like me would probably hate that, because, we're all like Salman Rushdie. But, yeah, so there you are. No top 10 of books I don't hate, because I don't hate most books. Instead, I just thought about it, and here's a list of books that I don't hate, so it does still fit. It's a list of books I just came up with after just literally banging my head against the wall for... banging my head against the wall for hours. I really, really, honestly... I really can't do lists, at least not ranked lists, because I'm really bad at that, and I get full-on paralysis when it comes to making choices about that kind of stuff. It doesn't work, because it's real torture. I'm not kidding you. So here's 10 books I thought about. Some of them I've made individual videos about. These are books I think you should really read, because I enjoyed them. They're not talked about enough. They do important things, and they have certainly helped turn me into the kind of reader I am these days. And there we go. These are, well, not in any proper order, because I'm really not good at doing top 10s. So here you go. Let's start with the first one of these. Arthur Machen, The Hill of Dreams. Now, I don't know if any of you actually know about Arthur Machen, have read Arthur Machen. Possibly Liam has read Arthur Machen. He's an old writer. He wrote in the late 19th century, early 20th century. He's really formative in a lot of ways for authors like Robert E. Howard, very much Clark Ashton Smith, and even more, obviously, H.P. Lovecraft. So he kind of takes that weird fiction. He's sort of like a proto-weird fiction guy in that regard. His big books are, big books, a lot of them are short stories, stuff like, say, The Great God Pan, The White Powder, stuff like that. You have a lot of these elements in there already. I chose The Hill of Dreams because I generally really enjoy the book. It's more of a weirdly dreamlike kind of story, as the title may imply. I think it's something that people who enjoy fantasy or like the slightly more creepy, weirder stuff should probably read at some point, because, it's formative in a lot of ways, and it's, beautifully written. So there you go, Arthur Machen, The Hill of Dreams. The next one is, of course, I have to count because otherwise I'll just fail, is, of course, Stone and Flute, and that's not all. Which is the entire title, by a German author, Hans Beermann. Now, the point is, supposedly there exists a English translation of this. It was published in the 80s by Penguin. There may be some used copies floating around somewhere. I thought about whether to put it on or not put it on this list. I've read it. I think it's probably the best straight-up German fantasy novel out there. I really don't like a lot of German fantasy. I think it's often very derivative and so forth. This one is very unique. It's called a fairy tale novel, and it does take elements from fable, from fairy tale. It has talking animals and stuff, or people communicating with animals, but it goes into all kinds of really interesting places. It's also an absolute doorstopper. It has 800 something pages, so there you go. In German, it's obviously Stein und Flöte und das ist noch nicht alles. You can get it even on in audio in German. I really hope. Unfortunately, there's no ebook of the English one, possibly of the German. I don't know. I really can't encourage you enough to actually pick that one up if you can find it somewhere. It's a beautiful book, and I hope the translation works, but Penguin is probably not the shittiest publisher when it comes to finding good translators. So here we go. That's number 2. What else do I think y'all should read? Number 3, let's go on with The Jungle by Upton Sinclair. I read it last year. It is technically a novel. It's also journalism. It is also activism. It is very much about the slaughterhouse industry in Chicago in the early 20th century, about how, capitalism is brutal in that way, how it mostly abuses and exploits migrant laborers, people that have just arrived in the US and don't know English or much English, and how they get exploited by everyone in the system, how, that kind of stuff really, really is terrible. It was hugely influential in a lot of ways. It made a lot of people really, really mad. It also led to the first actual regulations about food in a lot of ways in the US. Upton Sinclair did, as a journalist, actually do like real research and worked undercover in a slaughterhouse for a while, so he could claim that everything he describes in the book is in fact actually happening. He was pissed off because he wanted this to be about labor rights and, improve the conditions of workers, which did not happen because, it's America. But he got people mad about food hygiene. He famously said, "I wanted to touch them at their hearts and I got them in the guts." It's still a powerful book. It's really, really frustrating to read. It has had a huge impact, as I said, like in actual life. In some ways, it also has obviously had an impact on like how to do undercover journalism, how to maybe turn that into novels and so forth. So yeah, there you go. It's a really good book. It also is about like how communism is actually really good. Well, socialism in that case. So there you go. Read The Jungle by Upton Sinclair. It's very much a classic. It's worth reading. So that's 3 books. What else did I put on that goddamn list? Well, here's another one. I've spoken about it before. It's Blood in the Mist by Hope Merles. It's a wonderful book. I put it on this list here because I think it's interesting to see how women writers, were already writing books long before we started even thinking about the idea that maybe we should, read more women writers and so forth. It's a very unique book in a lot of ways. It's a fantasy story. It's had its impact certainly on other writers. It's more like a book for a writer's book in a lot of ways. It really mixes early feminist critique in some ways with wonderful, stuff, with wonderful fairy tale and British folklore stuff. It also manages to sort of slightly parody very specific parts of like Britishness in a lot of ways. In that regard, it's sort of like something that, later authors like, say, Terry Pratchett and Neil Gaiman and so forth took a lot from in that regard. And in fact, Neil Gaiman has obviously written an introduction to it because of course he has. So there you go. Read that one. I have a video on that one, so there you go. There are some where I have like full videos. If you read these books, you can then go and check out those videos and we can talk about those. That was book number 4, right? Yeah, see, that's why I hate fucking lists. I lose track. I literally wrote them down earlier and I'm already forgetting which books I put in there, so there you go. I'm mixing up the list already. What else did I put on that list? 5th book. The Salt Roads by Nalo Hopkinson. I read it last year. I think you should read it because it does some very interesting things. It's a book about slavery. It's a book about racism in all kinds of ways. It's also very much a book about gender issues. It covers the lives of 3 black women, in 3 different eras. One of them is late antiquity, one of them is 19th century Paris, and one of them is late 18th century Saint-Domingue, which is obviously no longer Saint-Domingue because it's Haiti now, and the one time slaves actually staged a revolt, were successful, took over the country, and got punished by France and other countries for it ever since. In that regard, it does do really interesting stuff. Nana Hopkinson herself is a Caribbean writer. I cannot recommend it enough. It's tough going. It's really brutal writing. It's really dark, so apply some content warnings that you would expect from a book that is both about being a woman and being black in the 18th and 19th century under slavery and so forth. But yeah, go read it. It's really, really, really good. And once again, it takes the fantasy genre to interesting places, and I think that's sort of like the overarching theme of this list is like stuff that is doing interesting things with the form, with the genre, goes different places, is either highly influential or is pushing the boundaries, because that's kind of what I like in general. You wouldn't have guessed it. So there we go. That is book number 5. What's book 6? I guess we'll go with Catherine Valente. Catherine M. Valente, you may know her from all kinds of books about the Eurovision Song Contest in space and other stuff. I picked the Refrigerator Monologues. It's a wonderful sort of series of linked up novellas, short stories, or whatever you want to call it, individual stories about women that have all died and are sitting in hell. But they haven't just died. They have been killed to be plot advances for their superhero lovers. Yes, they've been fridged. It's very much talks about that topic. It has sort of filed off the serial numbers because probably you wouldn't get, any permission to use names like Batman or Superman and so forth. But it's very clear which kind of heroes we're talking about, and including, of course, the famous Green Lantern fridging scene where the whole term comes from, and it talks about their lives, their dreams, the things they wanted to do, and how they were actually real full characters. And in that regard, it's an interesting thought experiment that manages to be incredibly sassy, incredibly angry, incredibly funny, and just, deal with the idea and shows how, as writers, whenever people make these choices, right, they cut off stories, they dehumanize in that way. And I think it's a powerful read. It's a short read. I highly recommend you go and read it. It's, it's just a lot of fun, especially if you're into comics. You will absolutely love this if you're into comics, and, well, and are probably not a terrible sexist, which, why would you be that, right? So that is The Refrigerator Monologues by Catherine M. Valente. Go read it. The next one is clearly Peter S. Beagle's A Fine and Private Place. Yes, I have a video about this. I read it earlier this year. Finally, I've wanted to read it for a long time. It's beautiful. It's all the magical things that Peter S. Beagle can bring to writing. It's his debut novel. He was 19 when he wrote this, which is absolutely fucking insane. And it's sort of almost urban fantasy. You could possibly call it proto-magical realism, whatever, all kinds of stuff. It's a love story set in a graveyard that has a talking raven. What else do you want? Right? I mean, it's clearly the most Neil Gaiman book that Neil Gaiman never wrote. It has wonderful prose. It has a lot of philosophy packed into really beautiful, quotable sentences. It deals with questions of loss, of sort of giving up, dropping out of society and so forth. Yeah, it's just a beautiful, heartwarming book. So go read it. Seriously, go read it. You won't regret it if you're, if you have both a heart and a head, I guess. So go read it. It's wonderful. And then, I don't know, watch the video and let's talk about it some more. So that is number 7, I think? Oh, wait, I'm already confusing it again. It's terrible. We had Noel Hopkinson, Catherine Valente, Hope Merleys, The Jungle by Upton Sinclair, Hans Beckmann, Arthur Markin. So wait, that's 6? God, I'm so bad at this. And Peter Spiegel, that's 7. All right. So, number 8. What else did I have on that list and have already forgotten? Oh, yeah, right. Let's take a classic that you should definitely go and read because I think it's, it's a wonderful book and you should go and read it. That is, obviously, Don Quixote by Miguel de Cervantes or just Cervantes. I have no idea about this. Anyway, it's a classic for a reason. It's a long book. You like long books, right? It's a good book. It's, once again, I think it's interesting in that it feels incredibly modern compared to what we usually think about. What would we assume from a book this old? It does almost metafictional stuff. It is a parody of Arthurian romance or general romance novels of the late Middle Ages. It is obviously a parody or like a book that talks about life in Spain at that time. It's incredibly funny. It's really fascinating in a lot of ways, and the kind of book that people that like Umberto Eco novels would probably also really love. And I put it here because I think it's important to have that kind of book, to read that kind of book and understand how old literary tradition in the form of what you might call a novel can be, in the way we deal with like different styles, the way we engage with fiction as fiction and can do stuff around that and about that and so forth. And in that, yeah, it's a fun book. It's really, really good. So go read that book, because it will help you be a better fantasy reader, because you'll understand all kinds of stuff. And you can be the one smart person whenever people talk about tilting at windmills and explain why they're doing it, using that phrase wrong. And you want to be a smart ass, right? All right, let's move on. And I think I've forgotten the 10th book, so I'll probably make up one that comes up in a second. Anyway, book number 9. Let's talk about it. The Satyricon by one Titus Petronius. It's a classic. It's also a fun book. Written in the 1st century BCE, possibly during the reign of Nero. It's a satire. It's about a bunch of people being gay in Asia Minor, being cursed by the gods. It's a satire of literature. It's a satire of life. It's incredibly funny. It has possibly the first werewolf in literature versus mythology. It has a lot of really weird sex scenes. It's very gay in a lot of ways. It's a powerful book. I put it on this list because I think more people should read it, just to see how modern, the Romans could be, how queer themes have been around for a long time, how, the difference, or to showcase the difference between, say, a novel and mythology, or like epic poetry or whatever you have, your different ways of treating, dealing with mythological matter and so forth. And I think it's really interesting in that regard to have that satirical edge to it. So that's my pick. Go read it. It's free. I mean, it's 2,000 years old, right? So you can get a free copy somewhere, and I don't think Petronius will starve to death if you steal it or, read on Gutenberg or whatever. So that is book number 9. And I have forgotten what I put in that list that I wrote down earlier, so I'll just pick a random book that I think y'all should go and read. I don't know. I'm blanking right now. Go read The Stars My Destination by Alfred Bester. It's a fascinating book, putting a lot of interesting, existentialist philosophy into science fiction, breaking a lot of molds when it comes to science fiction, the way it was told at the time. Go read it. It's really good. Also, then you can go and listen to the entire album Hardworlder by the Lord Witzlafek, and you want to do that as well, because it's really good. And that's 10 books you should go and read if you want to know more about fantasy and science fiction. And maybe I'll figure out what I actually wrote down and forgot. So there you go. Thanks once again. Have a great day. I'll talk to you possibly tomorrow about the state of the art. We will see. Once again, I don't know, like, subscribe, comment, do the things. And I'll see you in the next one. Cheers.